While I had the tractor at the neighbor's getting composted manure for the trees, I dropped a couple loads here at Nights and Weekends Homestead. Now that I have more material to work with, it's time to do some more planting. Today's project is to plant out the strawberry transplants that Michael brought from his garden. These are the little offshoots that we're spreading out beyond the area where he wants the strawberries growing. Rather than have them composted, I was happy to have them. A few years ago, I invested in hundreds of strawberry plants. The second year after planting, we actually got a good crop, and I was looking forward to at least 3 more years of quality harvest. Unfortunately, the wood chips I got for free and used to mulch most of the strawberries contain a lot of seeds of bindweed, which is an incredible plant, except for the fact that it's so destructive. Within the span of a couple weeks, I lost the entire strawberry patch, at least to the point where I knew it was hopeless to resist. So this year, I'm going to try again in a different location. Michael gave me 2 different varieties, Sparkle and Early Glow. I also managed to save a few transplants from the edge of the patch I just described. I should get a small crop from those this year. They're just on the other side of this compost area. The others are going out into the garden, next to where the hoop house will be this year. Before I can plant the strawberries, I need to prep the ground. In actuality, the ground has been being prepped over the winter. Late last summer, I spread this silage tarp over this plot, knowing that the hoop house would be here in the summer, growing tomatoes, cucumbers, and herbs. But the hoop house only takes up a portion of this garden plot. The portion outside, to the east, which in this plot is shown here, I'm going to plant to the strawberries, fruit trees, and other perennials. My goal is to diversify the gardens as much as possible, so there are as many food producers as I can get, producing different things at different times of year with different amounts and types of work and care needed. However, before I can make any of that happen, I have to clean up all of this stuff that's on the silage tarp, all of which went here last fall, because I didn't have time to find a better place for it then. The silage tarp performs the process of solarization, which is essentially the process where a bed is prepped to the point where it's ready to plant and then covered with a silage tarp for 2 reasons. First, the black plastic attracts the sun's heat, but also provides darkness and moisture retention on the soil so that seeds in the top 2 inches germinate. Then, the black plastic prevents those seeds from going very far. Once they've germinated, they're struggling up through the soil in the hope that once they break the surface, there will be plenty of sunlight so they can photosynthesize. The black plastic prevents that. So, after a while, those weed seeds that germinated and sprouted up their cotyledons, and in some cases, develop true leaves, eventually smother and die. As you can see, it works quite well, except of course in those places where there was a hole in the silage tarp. The 2 biggest tricks to this are leaving the silage tarp on long enough. Most experts that I've read recommend at least 3 weeks to germinate and fully smother the weeds. In my experience, that isn't long enough for some of the more tenacious weeds I've developed here. The other trick is to make sure that your soil is already prepped to plant, so you disturb it as little as possible. The weed seeds that are germinating are doing so in the top 2 inches of soil. You want that top 2 inches to remain the same top 2 inches that you had when the solarization was taking place. In other words, you don't want to bring more soil up to the surface where hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of other seeds are waiting to germinate. I'll be planting using a shovel here. This method works particularly well if you're using a precision seeder, like the one I've shown in previous videos. However, no matter what you do to put seeds into the soil you just solarized, there will be some disturbance, meaning there will be some weed seeds that come up to the surface. The trick is to do as little disturbance as possible depending on what you're planting. When Michael first brought these strawberry plants to me, they were each wrapped in individual variety bags. Just simple plastic bags like you get at the grocery store. They were clumped together in one big bunch. That's totally fine. In fact, if you purchase strawberry plants from, say, Fedco trees, that's how you'll get them. They can't stay that way for very long. The roots need to be spread out. If you do have to keep them that way, you can refrigerate them. But I've never really had much luck with doing that for very long, and found it's much more effective to just plant them. That being the case, I didn't have the opportunity to plant them directly into the place where they're going to be, which I'm doing now. I also didn't want to take up a bunch of pots by planting them individually. So I grabbed these cardboard boxes which I had lying around, filled them with soil, and just planted the crowns into that. I knew they weren't going to be in here long, so a cardboard box, which is going to break down the entire time I'm watering it, wasn't a big deal. And in fact, once I remove the tape, I can just throw it in the compost bin. It's already broken down partially anyway. It also makes it pretty easy to get these crowns out. They haven't been in long enough to spread their roots and intertwine with each other. So it's a fairly quick process to take them out and plant them into the soil. Once the crowns were planted, it was time to do a little bit more work on the bed. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I'm doing a little bit of experimentation this year with Charles Dowding's no-dig method. Essentially, I'm using this method everywhere else in my garden, but previously I've focused mostly on using leaves for mulch, which I have a lot of. Charles Dowding uses compost for mulch. When I was attending the main compost school, there was an expert, a PhD, I don't remember what in, from the UMaine Cooperative Extension. During one of our classroom sessions, he specifically raised this issue of using compost as a mulch, and recommended against it. However, his point was that compost as a mulch is incredibly expensive, and he's not wrong. However, in my case, I'm not a commercial farmer and I don't need vast quantities. And in my case, I can get all that I need and then some. I'm certainly not going to blanket the entire garden with compost as a mulch. I still use leaves and hay and anything else I can get my hands on. But for the purposes of building fertility and using mulch to suppress weeds and retain moisture, certainly in this permanent bed where a perennial crop is going to exist, I think it's worth the expense and effort. Especially since, essentially, the expense is the effort itself. The only thing it costs me to get all of this composted horse manure is the time. Since I borrow a truck, I have the easy loader, and I borrow a tractor. I already have the relationship with both the stable and the couple down the street that keeps horses as a hobby. In terms of monetary outlay, the only real expense is the gas that I put in the truck and the tractor to offset what I'm using. So, essentially, I can get as much as I can possibly use for $20 or $30 in gas. I think that's worth it. Well, I don't know if this video is going to come out. I dropped my phone today and it's got this spider web of cracks all through the screen now. So anyway, I just finished putting the compost mulch on the strawberries. Out. Good boy. And I just need to rake it out and then we'll be good to go. At least for a couple of weeks until I can get a chance to mulch in the rest of this bed.